This episode of Shoptalk is brought to you by Lhasa OMS, your clinic's partner in wellness. Later in the show, listen for a special offer from Lhasa to help you with all the transitions your patients face. Andrew Nugent-Head, welcome to Geological Shoptalk.
Thank you for having me.
Today, we are here to talk about colds, flus, coughs. We've got a little series, and this is being aired at the time of year when people are probably walking into your clinic with the usual respiratory bugs of the season. I thought it'd be a good time to talk about how you take care of people with these kinds of things. You have spent a little time in China, 28 years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
I always tell people I was a slow learner.
well, this is kind of a slow medicine. I mean, not in terms of effect, but in terms of how you let it come into you and you learn to use it. It's not a night school thing.
It does take some
take time.
absorption.
Yeah. You studied with Republican-era doctors. You studied with folks who were around before TCM showed up. And
Yes,
so you've got
it
some
was.
perspectives on that.
I was very lucky that my three primary teachers and then many of the other doctors that I spent time with, they were in their 80s and 90s when I met them in the 80s. So they had been born and educated prior to 1949, and their teachers had all been in practice before the Republic of China. So it was still the medicine that you would have seen if you were seeing a highly skilled doctor who was not entrenched in one way or another, but treating everybody from the rich to the poor, from aristocrats to prostitutes. Everyone is going to come to see these doctors and then their students who came along. So I was able to be working with a lot of bone setting, high fevers, appendicitis. Everything was just coming in the door with that level of doctor. They were still a full practice practitioner of emergency medicine and chronic medicine.
This was the Chinese medicine before it became the slow medicine.
Exactly. And that's something that I try hard to stress is that there is my own journey in this medicine, as I think we talked about in our previous one, was that I had a motorcycle accident, broke the bones in my foot, had them set with Chinese medicine, and was walking 2 weeks later on it. So I never believed it was a slow medicine, and then only found out when I came back to the West to find out what had happened here.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Now, one of the things, and we were talking a little bit about this before rolling tape, the ethic of the doctors that you studied with, there was this idea about study with me, but don't resemble me.
And that's a very important point. The 要学我,不要像我, is what they were saying is we want to learn from them, but we don't want to mimic or imitate them. And that also implied to formulas. So they would tell me, listen, here's Guizhitang. And, it's this season, so we'll talk about Guizhitang as a great formula base, but you want to study what Guizhitang really is. You don't want to just use Guizhitang for Weigan, externally contracted, cold wind, etc. That the whole point was to study classic formulas, but then not rigidly use them. And so they really hammered into me the idea that 要学精出, you want to study the classic books, then 要尊敬经验, which you want to respect experience and what's happened through time. And that's hugely important because if we lock ourselves into the idea that it has to be Guizhi, Shaoyao, Shengjiang, Dazao, Gancao, right? We believe that's how you treat a Weigan. We've missed the fact that in ancient China, that's great. But if I live in a different part of China that doesn't have Shaoyao, if I live in a different part of China that has Xiaozao, not Dazao, it was never meant to be the herb names. It was meant that we're supposed to study the flavor and nature of the formula. And the herb was just a placeholder that was very effective for someone at some point using that strategy of a warm, acrid, a cool, sour, two completely opposite flavors used in the same dosages, and then Shengjiang, Dazao, Gancao, or a spicy, hot, acrid Shengjiang, a sweet Dazao that's not too cloying, and a Gancao that's been honey fried but is very stimulating, right? And once we understand that, we can stick any herb in there. It doesn't have to be a Guizhi Shaoyao. And that's a key idea of what was trained into me is know why, and then you change according to the situation in front. If you don't know why, you just have to follow the rote idea and pray the patient happens to fit that idea. It no longer becomes a patient-centric medicine when we are trapped in doing things rote without understanding the why.
Yes. Now, I remember when I was first studying Weigan, externally contracted conditions, we would use that rubric of, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it a Ma Huang thing? Is it cold? Or is it this more wind strike thing? Is it Guager? And it's a useful rubric to look at, I think. But it sounds like you're looking at the herbs less in terms of what the herbs do and what, rather, I guess I should say, what the herbs are, what the flavors are,
Exactly.
and therefore the action that comes out of that.
Right. And hopefully you'll be able to post the link to the free article. But Julianne does a great job on laying out, she was in the Journal of Chinese Medicine, that herbs work because of their flavor in nature. And then the flavor in nature does something. So acrid does something, sweet does something, sour does something, hot does something, cool does something. And then how strong the acrid, how strong the sweet is, how strong the temperature may be defines how intensely it does it. Right. So any herb that matches the flavor and nature of Guager could be used instead of Guager because we don't care about Guager. We care about something that's warm and acrid and going to travel in the body and warm it at the same time.
Okay.
So once we understand that, then Guager just happens to be what they had and what was common, but you could use 10 different other herbs that are similar to it. And that idea is huge because otherwise we don't know how to modify. And when I'm teaching herbs, I say, listen, here's Guager Town, but I write the flavor and natures. I don't tell them what the herbs are. And I'll list 5 different formulas by flavor and nature and say, what formulas are these?
Oh, that's interesting.
And that way, you look at cold acrid, cold bitter, warm acrid, neutral warm sweet, and then a hot sweet and a sweet neutral and a sweet traveler. And that's actually Xiaochai right? And you see, they're doing a couple of bitter acrid and a bitters and a cold acrid and a cold bitter and a warm acrid and a neutral sweet, right? And you start seeing how they're flexing these flavor natures to do 2 bitters, but one's acrid. 2 cold, but one's acrid, one's bitter, right? Two warm herbs in the warm idea, but it's actually going to be toxic, acrid, and sweet, right? And you start being like, oh, that's clever because that covers a lot of ground. And then you can change it. So for me, when I get sick, I never get hot, right? I will never have the Guager tongue where I feel a little of that. The wind's coming up and I want to button back up. I'm just cold. I'm not long cold. I'm just cold. I'm going to wear a lot of clothes. I'm going to be okay. There is no
What is
reason.
Ma Huang cold for people that may not understand the distinction between
Having
cold and Ma
So
Huang
having
cold?
had a true Ma Huang cold, and we shouldn't say Ma Huang because Ma Huang is paired with Shigao just as often as it's paired with Guager.
Mm.
But people don't think that way, right? But for true Ma Huang Tong, so Ma Huang Guager as your 2 herbs together is full on shiver. And I have literally just been in a bed and been shivering to this because of being sick. And you need Ma Huang, right? There's no kidding around there. And Guager is just not going to get the
Not going
heart
to
rate
cut
up to do that. It's not going to cut it. But for me, Xiaoyao is a terrible herb, right? I don't need cool sweet. I'm not sweating. I don't have that heat that shows up that's a sick heat. So for me, I put in Dongwei. So for me, Guager Tong is Guager Dongwei.
Oh.
Why not warm my yin, right? Or if I'm feeling a little more susceptible to wind, for me, Guager Tong is going to be Guager Fang Fang, Shengjiang, Dazao, Ganzhao. Though honestly, most of the time I use Ganjiang because if we're out of Shengjiang, Ganjiang is just convenient. But being able to stop and say, hey, why am I taking Xiaoyao in Guager Tong? Because I don't fit all of the sentences of Guager Tong, but I fit enough that I want a Guager variation. So get rid of xiaoyao, put in dangui, put in fang fang, my most two common things that I do for myself, right?
Mm.
If it's a little bit in the lungs, why not guijia banxia shengjiang dazao ganzao, right? Um, if it's a little raspy but not any phlegm, why not switch things around instead of ma huang xingren, guijia xingren, shengjiang dazao ganzao, right? I can really play with that because I'm not stuck into these ideas.
Okay. So let's get into this a little bit. The idea of what you're talking about is fascinating. I think a lot of people listening to this will cotton to it. It's like, well, that makes sense. And they've studied something about flavors with herbs and it's one of those things like in the back of your mind, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I haven't heard people talk about it or use it particularly in that way. One of the things that I think many of us appreciate about Chinese medicine is that we're not treating a condition, we're treating a person. We like to say that. In fact, we
Mm-hmm.
usually will put it in our advertising as well because it sounds good and it is good. But when it comes to Wygon, it seems that there is a predilection to go to, well, they got a cold, they've got an external thing, I have to treat that pathogen. How do you keep your focus on the person in the midst of, hey, they've got a cold or a COVID or a wind heat or whatever?
Well, that's the most important thing because um, 8 or 9 times out of 10, if we focus on the concept of a bacteria or a virus, the cold, or we factor on that we make a decision, this is wind heat or this is wind cold. The truth is, if they don't take herbs, they're going to be better in a week. And if they take herbs, they're going to be better in 7 days. Right. And so if we don't actually learn to really focus on the person and change the fundamental ideas of what the Neijing talks about, which is if it's cold, heated, if it's hot, cold. Don't get confused. Well, they're hot and cold. Well, that's the whole point of Guizhi Tang. There's Guizhi and there's Shaoliao. Like, don't overthink this. Shao Chai Hu Tang. There's Banxia's hot and there's Chai Hu's cool and there's Wang Qin's cold, right? So we don't want to get tied up in anything, but we want to stop and say, this person has something. And then we want to pick location, right? This person, it's a head cold. So if a person's got a head cold, why am I sticking in Banxia, right? Banxia is very warming in the chest, but it's not really going to help a head that much, right? We're going to want to get something that's really going to be potently up to the head. If that's a mix of Xinihua or we need to dry it out with some Gaobun that's so hot and acrid, but do be careful. Gaobun's famous for giving people headaches. It dries the fluids in a head cold so fast they get stuck up there and they're left with a headache. So you want to be a little careful, but
Yeah,
you
that
know,
dry phlegm is a huge problem. This is one of
it
the
is.
reasons I think
And
antihistamines cause often as much mischief as they solve because they dry it out
yes,
so quickly.
they do. And for so many times, I'll see patients will be like, well, I can hear the phlegm, so I have to dry it. Yeah, but it's a deep phlegm. Don't dry it out. Give them gualo, give them shingren so it's easier for it to leave, right? Grease the tracks or moisten the lungs so it can get rid of something. Don't further dry it so it becomes craggly stuff stuck in the corners. And then they get 60% better in 24 to 48 hours. And then it lingers for 3 weeks. They're like, yeah, it was a really bad cold. No, that's iatrogenic medicine. you know, you dried it in their lungs. You got them better enough that they're no longer sick feeling, but you left something in their lungs because you chose herbs that were going to do that. And balancing out how to treat the person and staying focused on the person with the truth that the biggest battle between the Shanghanlun people and the Wenbing people is that the Shanghanlun is all about tailoring according to the human, right? And so all the formulas are being modified. People say you got to memorize all the formulas. The truth is, and I'm making up this number, there's 16 formulas in the Shanghanlun, and the rest are variations of those 60, right? But it's just all variations in there. And then the one being was like, hey, there's illnesses that have a personality, and it's bufan nan yu lao shao, right? They don't differentiate between the old, the young, male, and female. You get this, and it's going to go in this progression no matter what. And if you happen to be comorbid, goodbye. And if you're not comorbid, good luck. And COVID was an example of that, where once you know that there's a very specific strain, like a COVID or a bird flu or the bubonic plague, and it doesn't matter how robust I am, I'm going to get sores under my armpits with the bubonic plague, right? That's just how it shows up. And so being able to balance in one hand that if there is a specific thing going around that has a personality, you have to treat that illness's personality, just like you're treating a person. So
Oh,
you have to be able to
that's an
treat the
interesting thing.
person and you have to be able to treat the person, the illness. But again, I'm never treating damp heat. I'm never treating dryness. I'm never treating any of those. Just COVID has a personality. It's a person, right? So I'm going to do this, this, and this to it. And I'm not going to use those herbs because those herbs are never going to do anything for a COVID presentation. And for the person, I have to factor that in. So then the formulas become very person-centric and they get better. And then there's illness-centric, and then we overlap the two. So that's really as simple as that. And the more it's a general illness going around, the more, and I'm going to make up the number, it's 70% person, 30% the illness personality.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you have a strain of something like a COVID or a bird flu or something else that's happening, then the more it's 70% personality of the illness, 30% personality of the person. And that's very freeing because I can trust that with a COVID patient, what they feel today, I can tell them what they're going to feel tomorrow. And I can tell them what they're going to feel the day after. And then I have to modify that briefly based on their overweight, underweight, on lots of medications, exercise, don't exercise, etc. But it's going to follow a pattern. Whereas if they catch just the good old-fashioned influenza, or they just get a cold and they're sick and they're run down, it can run 10 different ways. Because the point of the Shanghai in the early stages is that the illness you have of a wind strike, what they're calling a wind strike, is a gateway illness. From this illness, if untreated, it can go one place or another. And the way to understand that is you get sick, you didn't take care of it, you then went out and partied and it got late and you were in a t-shirt and you came out of the dance club and you're sweaty and then you get even sicker and 2 days later you have pneumonia. The illness was a gateway to pneumonia. The illness was a gateway to bronchiectasis because you were so sick, it got a chance to take colony in there and get set up. That cold wind or heat wind is, if you don't get it right away, it's a gateway to something nastier. And then you have to treat the person. Whereas the one big was, here's the nasty. Let's talk about the nasty already. And that's how I look at it.
Okay. That's an interesting rubric. And I like the idea here of that there are illnesses, they've got a strong personality. You have to deal with that strong personality. Whereas there are other illnesses, it's just a general malaise that could get worse.
They can even be very sick, but the sick will vary on the person, right? Whereas a lot of the illnesses like the COVIDs with the one bings we're talking about is that it doesn't care who you are. It's going to go in a certain pattern because it has that personality. And one of the things that's important, and I know our time is limited, is that when we want to understand how to treat this, is we don't want to overthink it. We want to stick with Neijing strategies, right? And so the first step, I always say, is change the landscape of the person, right? Change the temperature of the person, right? So the landscape, I'm looking at this patient and they're cold even though they have a fever. Even though they're like, oh yeah, I have a fever of 102. Yeah, but if they're sitting there in cold, who gives a crap about the fever? Treat cold. That's their landscape, right? You get rid of their cold, the fever comes down, right? The second thing is pay attention to moisture, right? If they're very, very dry, moisten them. If they're very, very wet, dry them. You know, if you hear something in the lungs, if you hear it in the head, if it's dry and raspy, COVID is a very dry illness for the lungs, right? Until it progresses further down the line into pneumonia or something else like that. So I want to pay attention to that moisture. And then third, understand location. I mean, it makes no sense to give chest herbs when it's in the head. It makes no sense to give head herbs when it's in the chest. We can have a little bit of one or the other to keep things from migrating, sure. But following a xiao chai hutang, when it's a head cold that's coming and going, why am I putting in banxia? I can put in something else that will be much more drying to the head than drying to the chest, right? Tuanxiong cha tiao san, which is a wonderful formula
Hmm.
where it's using tuanxiong and then it's using no ma huang, it's using caffeine, you know? And I'll tell my patients, listen, we don't, they're like, Andrew, I'm on the road and I'm sick. Please help. And I'm like, okay, tell me your symptoms. And I'm like, okay, go to the supermarket and you need to get some nutmeg and some cinnamon, a little bit of chili, some ginger, and then you put it all in a cup and you're going to put like 3 espressos in there, right? That's my mahua. And then they drink that and they get in the blanket and they're like, dang, and they sweat. And then I'm like, okay, once you really sweat, dry off. Do not go out in the cold for a while. Let things settle. And there you go. And understanding that functionality of what are we trying to accomplish, not what a formula somehow magically does. And once we think, what are we trying to accomplish? Warm them or cool them, moisten them or dry them, put it in the right location, give it the right exit, right? We need to exit through the urine. Do we need to exit through the feces? Do we need to exit through the skin or sweat? Nobody does a lot of vomiting anymore, but in the old days, exit through the vomiting, exit with bleeding. I mean, just pick an exit if you need an exit.
You're
Otherwise,
going
you
to need
get,
some kind of exit. You always need
that's
an
this
exit. You
medicine.
need to
You
give a way
always,
out.
you got to do that. And sometimes the way out is to dilute it so that it just kind of goes, yeah, okay, and then just leaves with everything. And sometimes it's very aggressive. And, where I think Chinese medicine shines compared to what's happening standard wise in Western medicine is that we're very interested in that exit
Hmm.
because living in Asia and spending so much time in Southeast Asia, traveling and working, I've had dysentery, amoebic dysentery, giardia, dengue fever. I mean, and I'd had them all more than once. It's kind of like, oh yeah, hi, okay. And I watch people who take Imodium and it's terrible. It stops the diarrhea, but then it traps the illness in there. And then they have food sensitivities for the rest of their lives until we fix them. Whereas Chinese medicine is going to figure out the exit. I'm not worried about stopping your diarrhea.
Right.
I'm worried about getting rid of something so the diarrhea stops.
Yes.
And that's a very different sentence.
It really is. And you were pointing out earlier in our conversation here that treated incorrectly, things get stuck. For example, you get the dryness in the sinuses because you use galbun and it's
Mhm.
too drying. Was it
It's so
galbun that you
important
said?
yeah,
Yeah.
Galvan
Yeah.
it's famous for, it does a miraculous job for clearing out that sinus. And then they have a terrible headache. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's a lingering thing. It's like, no, that's
No, no, no.
iatrogenic.
It's dried. Or like me, I'm very good at getting these raspy coughs because there's phlegm. It's dry. It needs to be
Mhm.
moistened.
Yeah.
So
Gualo is my friend. I
yeah,
love gualo.
yeah, I like it
It's,
too. Now,
you know,
talk to us a little bit about some of the coughs that people might see because of, I don't want to say mistreatment, but let's just say treatment that was suboptimal. You missed something. And now you find out about it because they've got a particular kind of a cough.
yes. And I will say that the number one thing I will hear with the people who are training with me is they start to feel very comfortable treating Wigans, but then they're intimidated by the cough or they're left with a cough and they're never sure what to do. And if you are a Chinese scholar reader, Chen Shouyan has a great, the Yixue Sanzijing, and his 3-character classics on medicine has a great one on Kuso. I've translated several, but I haven't translated the Kuso one yet on cough. But he does it's 3 characters. So it's this cute little rhyming thing that guides you how to treat cough and what mistakes not to make. But the first thing about treating a cough is we don't want to overthink it. And that's the most biggest problem is that we're taught, oh, yellow phlegm, I've got to use a Jininhua, I've got to use a Lianqiao, I've got to use something because it's bacterial, because it's yellow-green. And if it's a white cough, it's cold or it's clear, I've got to use warming herbs. And we don't want to think that way. We want to stop and we want to be clear that what's happening systemically. Is the cough due to there's something in there that's filling the lungs? And I tell my patients, listen, if there's a lot of water in there, your lungs are drowning. And if you watch somebody who's drowning, they go, because the moisture keeps covering all the areas that are supposed to be taking oxygen, right? And so that's what happens is they're okay. And then they lie down, they have a coughing spasm because this part of the lung was dry, this part was fluid, and they lie down and the fluid sloshes. And now all this area that was breathing gets covered in fluid. It's got to cough, cough, cough until it stops and gets used to it. And then they get used to lying down, they go back up, and this part that is now dry suddenly gets wet, and they start coughing all over again until it's over. So, you're like, okay, I have to get that water out. So I've got to dry it out. And then if it's like the thick cough, well, if I dry it out, it just gets thicker, right?
And then it doesn't go anywhere. You were talking about the importance of giving it an exit, getting it out.
Yeah.
You can't just transform it into nothing.
That's exactly it. It's not Bencha. It's not this thing that just dries it to nothing. It dries it to a point where the body can take it out. But if the body can't take it out because it's dry, sticky, even if it's got a texture to it, it just gets harder to move. So we want to know when to give something slip. It's carrot and stick. And we want to be nice to those lungs. And if it's a weak cough because they've been sick for a while and their qi is down, Wu Wei is great at consolidating those lungs so it has strength. Because otherwise it's just weak. And so any stimulation, cold air, moisture, a beverage change, anything, a temperature change, and the lungs just go, and Wu Wei just sours that up and gives it strength, right? But if there's something trapped in there, Wu Wei is going to hold it in there. But we don't want to panic. Like, well, then I shouldn't use Wu Wei. I tell everyone, if you really want to get good at coughs, study Xiaoqing Longtang, right? Because Xiaoqing Longtang is traditionally for what we call pneumonia. It can be used for lots of things. But you see Wu Wei next to Mahua. You see Xixin, you see Guizhi, right? You see such different herbs happening all at once that you can get an idea that it's totally okay to have sour and have bitter and have acrid all in there. We just want to get the mixture right. And the truth is it's like cooking, right? We want a mix of flavors in there so the lungs go, out it goes, or the thing in there just doesn't like living there anymore. And I talk about, that's what I mean by changing the landscape, is a lot of things that we have, no matter how severe, they're opportunistic. They like a cold, wet environment. They like a hot, dry environment. Right. So they thrive in an environment.
Change the environment. They decide, I don't like it here anymore. Not easy living anymore.
Not easy living anymore. And so a lot of times the mistake I see is, like we talked right before the cameras rolling, that we live in a Yin Chao Sen or Ganmao Ling world, right? And, everyone's like, okay, viral, bacterial, Jininhua kills, we use it. And the truth is, if you change the environment, the bacteria or virus will die. You don't need an antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral herb that's shown up in Chen and Chen saying this is antibacterial, right? You just change the environment and it dies.
So let's say you got squatters living in your house and you can't get rid of them. Well, if you turn off the water and you turn off the electricity,
turn off the heat,
they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Air conditioning's on the fritz. Nobody wants to be there.
Yes. I think what I'm hearing you say with coughs, well, all of this really, but coughs in particular, is that it's not one thing. It's dynamic. You're going to use things that are dispersing. You're going to use things that are consolidating. You're going to be doing some drying, some moistening. You're doing all these things. It's very kinetic.
It is very kinetic. And we often translate it in English, the lung is the weak organ, but it's not. In Chinese, it's nun, right? Tender. And that nun is tender, but it's not tender like emotional tender. It's a little gushy, right? And so it's like tofu. It's soft tofu. It's not hard tofu. So it gets affected, and it's what everything is coming in and it's what's coming out. And so being clear on when to sour it or when to give it Wang Qi to strengthen it, or I'm a huge fan of just saying, I'm going to warm the chest overall, right? I'm going to do one thing or another. And then I'm a big fan of Rendongtang, which is the vine of Jininhua.
Rendongtang.
Rendongtang.
Rendongtang. I think of that more for like arthritic conditions.
No, I mean, it's fantastic for the chest and the lungs. And I tend to use it. I now do use Jininhua, but if you had been with me for I'm going to get the math wrong. For the first 20, 30 years, how long have I been practicing medicine? 35 years. So for the first 30 years, I might have written less than 200 grams of Jininhua in an entire year, right? Because I always stock my own pharmacy. It shows up brown and dead. Why do I expect that to do anything, right? It's supposed to be this green, lush thing. And then COVID happened, and now the quality is fantastic. But, because we have an herb farm, so we grow it. And you have like 2 or 3 days to pick it because it hasn't flowered. It goes, but you have to get it before it flowers, right? But the vine, you can pick anytime. And the vine has many of the same properties.
Oh,
and it's
okay.
cheap, right? And it's cheap. Jininhua is expensive. The vine's not. So I can use 30, 45 grams. Use the vine. Now Jininhua is great quality. Thank you, COVID, right? Bless COVID. I can now use Mafwang and nobody gets scared. And Jininhua is good quality. Lianxiao is still terrible quality. It's traditionally supposed to be Qing Lianxiao, or it's not supposed to be all dead and brown, like the late stage, right? Any case, different topic.
Andrew, you've got a lot to share about this. Thank you for spending some time with us today to think about the personality of the bugs, about the personality of the person.
Yeah, just don't be afraid to slot out different herbs, flavor nature, and then just take out the herb and put in the one that makes sense. Don't follow rote. Don't think of a formula as a chunk.
It's a different way of thinking. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you and learn more about what you're doing.
Well, the easiest place is traditionalstudies.org, our website. And from there, it will launch you to our online platform where, frankly, we have so much material, it's overwhelming. And then it'll lead you to our in-person training courses. Next year, we have a fantastic 5-module tangible acupuncture for orthopedic injuries course. And it's the last time I'll be teaching that course myself. After that, it'll be my senior people teaching that as I teach different things. It'll also lead you to our clinic where people can come to observe for 1, 2, 3 weeks, see us practicing, watch us treat patients, see the formulas written. If they're able to stay for more than a week, they can see the patients come back and the changes. And then finally, we do have a residency program where we take people for a full year, 5 days a week. They are in our clinic watching us and then working and treating patients. But that is not just a random thing that's open. Those are people who've been training with us or are taking our courses, show aptitude, and then they can do a full residency, which it's kind of shocking that we live in a world where Chinese medicine doesn't have residency or fellowships. We just graduate and practice.
Well, it's still new here in the West. We're working it out.
We're working it out, we're working it out. It's getting better. I will say that.
It is, because people are making an effort, and there's folks like you who have something to teach, and you're doing it. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, and always thank you for helping share the medicine. What you do is more important than what I do, because otherwise nobody knows.
Brother, we're here to do it together.
Take care.
When practitioners reach for a Chai Hu Guizhi Tang or Shaoqing Long Tang, they need quality that they can trust. Lhasa OMS supplies the herbs your clinic needs to be ready for the cold and flu season. Visit Lhasa OMS to source the classical formulas featured in this series. Use the code REMEDY20 for 20% off your next purchase at lhasaoms.com. Some exclusions apply. See the website for details. That's it for this episode of Shop Talk. Did you learn something that brought a patient to mind? Don't keep a good thing to yourself. Share it with a friend. They'll be happy that you did. And tune in again for our next episode of Shop Talk.